what else we got? We got story research, which is something AC brought up. Like,
Yeah, that's
I'll
again.
ask this: like, how much research should you put into certain
Oh
things
man,
for
if
your
you're not
story?
on a watch list after researching, you're doing something wrong, dude.
If
you're not-
Why
if
do
you're
you
not
why do you
coming
think I
through the
became a
anarchist
writer?
hook-
I needed an explanation that would pass the
Bro,
psych test.
I mean, sometimes the shit that I search on, like, because I got somebody dying, like I got somebody with heat powers, so I'm like, okay, at what point does somebody die from a heat stroke or something like that? I need to know that.
Yeah.
There's just so many different ways I need to know how people can die.
I was looking,
It's
yeah,
like-
I was looking up scurvy and all kinds of
If
stuff.
you start
I
eating your
will-
own flesh to sate your own hunger, how long will you last?
What are the effects of cannibalism? Just curious. Like,
Self cannibalism.
curious.
Brains, man. Eric brains.
I will say this my one thing with research is that I'm very much a get what you need and then get on with it. And I think that is one of the nicer things about, being in the internet age where, for example, when researching languages, back in the day, if, say someone's scripting an episode of Johnny Quest, no one's going to sit down and look up a regional tongue for a native tribe or something. So they're just going to tell the voice actor, make up something that vaguely sounds Spanish or Portuguese, and they run
Like
with it. And so you have a bunch of-
Highlander.
So you have a bunch of these nonsense languages. But now you can actually
Anyway, I'm Spanish.
I'm Spanish.
But
You wee
anyway,
fuck.
so not only can you now look up words, so you now have written language, but also you can look up phonetic enunciations, and you can actually work on learning enough to say perform. Like a good example, again to use my own work, is that on Alan Firedale, I've actually done 2 episodes where I speak Navajo, and I learn words
Navajo.
phonetically. Right.
Sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean,
and I-
look. Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
No, and it's really it's nice to do that because I look at I like there to be a level of authenticity, but also if you're writing something, it's all about scope too. It's one thing if you're writing an epic, if you're writing an epic and you have to develop this very fleshed out world and you want to have all this information on hand. Like, I mean, for God's sakes, Richard Adams created a language for rabbits. There is a Latine glossary at the back of Watership Down. There are people who put a lot of effort into that, but at the same
that movie
time,
made,
you're
that
just
movie
writing like
made me
a.
so upset when I was a child.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Still one of
creating
Years old.
creating a new language, that's a whole different thing. But I'm like, to me, it's like if I get a sense that you didn't even do your bare minimum research on something,
Well, if you're
Like,
wrong
especially
about
with
really
books coming
basic
out to-
things often, it's
Yeah.
gonna be
But especially in today's age, it like upsets me because I'm like, bro, we're gifted with Google and other technologies. They didn't have that shit back then. They had to go guess.
Yeah, and one of the other fun things too I think about is that for me personally, research has always been fun. Whenever I'm working on anything, whether it's working on a video topic or working on book, I love researching. And I also love working with people who also research with me. Because on 365, I've got a concept. I got a concept consultant who's been my high school, who's from, basically he's been my friend for life, and both of us have this obscene knowledge of military history. And so we're going to be whenever I need an idea for a bizarre military vehicle, I'll just roll up to him and be like, hey, what weird shit do you got for me?
That's kind of gay.
You.
That's awesome. I like that.
Just roll up.
well-
What do you got for me, big boy?
Jacket. We got an M42 Duster. We got M50 Antos. We got the M56 Scorpion. What you want?
What you need? What you got?
Scorpion.
I always bring
Get
up this
over here.
example, but there's a popular booktuber, and he kept referring to the magazine as a clip, and I'm like, you're obviously
Wait,
not a gun person.
Are you referring to the one that we've talked about?
Yeah,
before?
Daniel Green. He ain't seen this shit. But I mean, he's look, politically, he's I'm guessing he's anti-gun, which is fine, no
Yeah,
problem,
probably
whatever,
never shot
right?
one.
But if you know you don't know anything about guns and you have a gun part that you don't know, or maybe you're guessing or second guessing yourself,
Just Google it.
just Google it.
Yeah.
Why are you calling, like, you're taking me out? I'm like, this person's supposed to be proficient with guns and they're calling a magazine a clip. Like, this is basic, simple stuff. And then I'm like, okay, how much of the other shit in this book is zero research been done? It's
Right.
lazy. I hate
Or,
that.
hear me out, do what I do to all my military friends to piss them off. Call it a magazine clip. Just see what happens.
I accept that. All right, I accept that.
Oh, my buddy used to get so pissed. Yo, Maji!
Hey,
I,
Maji in the house.
yeah, I had to.
Oh,
I
I
had to
thought
do
you said
an
Maji is a hoe. I'm like, holy
Oh.
fuck. She just got here, man.
Jesus
extensive
Christ.
amount of nautical research when I was writing my novel. About a third of the book is lost at sea, you know. So I got the fun Google searches like, you know, how many calories in a human body? Can you get enough potassium if you eat them to prevent scurvy? Like, what types of food have the most scurvy? Or sorry, what types of
top
food have
10
the most?
uses for porpoise fat.
So
Yeah, vitamin C in raw meat. You know,
Are
like
they- in
can I
cannibal-
just eat
this is-
algae?
This is an
Does that
aside,
count?
but like in cannibal culture, there are guys that like, yo, if you're eating another human well done, you're a loser. Like that's not the right way.
He looks over. Don't eat the dick. that's
Medium
gay.
rare, no human at all.
Emily,
I'd rather have cow.
Emily, you're 100% spot on with that actually, because there's more nutrients if you don't cook it. I found that out in my
Well, I
research.
know
Already, sir.
why AC is going to be on the evening
Oh,
news
wow.
next time I check.
Well, spoilers, but that's how they kind of get by. They have to use.
that's how you get brainworms, though.
No, I know you
Yeah.
avoid the brain stem and the brain.
They
fat.
don't
Every
eat
cannibal
much.
knows that.
They're fine.
Every cannibal knows that.
If you're not cooking your
That's
meat
what I'm
at
saying.
all, you maybe
In old
deserve it.
kindergarten, you
Gouda.
learn that. Moving on.
Did you get to the? You just started my book. Did you happen to get to the island chapter?
Yeah, we're on the
Okay.
island.
That was a good movie,
So
too.
that chapter had more research done on it than anything else. And
I
it was-
watched every season of Alone, front to back.
well, I was really on a Survivor kick, you know, and I was just like watching it, but like Naked and was it Naked and Afraid or something like that, like a bunch. And I'm
Oh,
like,
no.
like so, you know, I'm like, of course I had to insert that into my book, and but like it became to this whole thing where I'm like, okay, they got they got to figure out how to drink water or whatever. So what are they going to do with bowls? So I had to like Google the shit out of all this stuff, and like somebody breaks a leg, you know, how do you patch it up or whatever, this and that, and it's just like
Yeah, look it up. What do you do when
copious
you
amounts
break
of
your leg on
research.
an island by yourself? Oh, you die.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. No, it turns out being lost at sea or on an island is probably one of the worst fates you could do. Like, you might as well just jump into the water if you know you're not going to be rescued.
No, but you don't know that.
you don't know that
no,
exactly. Yeah.
all of these old ships, they would like they were. I read the journals of guys. They had times just no wind for like
No
imagine no
That
wind.
was
They
in the
can't
movie, that
move anywhere. They're stuck there for like I'm talking like 3 weeks.
Yep.
yeah.
And you're like,
Mhm.
we may die out here. We're running out of water. We're
Yeah.
drifting. We're not moving anywhere. We're boned.
My real quick, I want you guys to tell me some of your proudest research injections. Don't be afraid of spoilers, but if you don't want to spoil anything, that's fine. For my book, just more on the cannibalism thing, I'm really proud of because they get lost at sea, swept away by a storm during a mutiny, so everything is just effed right after that, right? They had to throw a bunch of stuff overboard. Lightning was cracking, which is attracted to their weapons. The ship is higher elevation than the water. Lightning might strike these goddamn swords. Throw them overboard was the solution, which creates a situation of have and have nots. Some people have swords, others don't, the people who refused. But anyway, they're lost, and scurvy, starvation, sickness, all that. Basically, their solution is, and it's morbid, but it's freaking on point with like the movie we watched, right? They'd made some pragmatic decisions, and you just have to when you're at sea. But the connection was made that essentially they were drawing sharks, and she had to make the choice to, like, anybody who dies like of scurvy or something, just pass them along to the dragonborn reptilian people who are now her like freed slaves who like do whatever she wants, and in secret they'll make some chum for the sharks, and you draw a shark in, and you have somebody like that kid in Master and Commander out on the little ship, right? You have like a team out there using the chum, quote unquote, to draw the sharks in. Then you freaking capture a shark, and everybody has enough like potassium and vitamin C after that. And I had them try that enough times for them to get to a point where they could reasonably find algae, because there's certain types of surface algae that have vitamin C in it, and you can dry that, make it into a powder, put that powder into
gotta be
your
careful with that,
bone
though.
soup and stuff like that. Yeah, you do. But that's kind of how I got through it. They eventually found algae. They failed at catching sharks, which is really interesting, until they don't fail, and then they have shark, and it's like this cool moment. I could have wrote the whole book like this, and it would have been awesome.
See, this is why I'm a bad student. I've done copious amounts of research on both of my books, and I remember almost zero of it. But I know Tale of the Dunce Whisperer.
I mean, you're on a short bus right now. Did we expect another result here? Or?
I definitely had to look up some absolutely retarded shit for Dunce Whisperer.
Oh, dude,
Really?
I started doing research for a story I was writing about El Canada. It's in the future where America bombs the crap out of itself. It gets too dry, so everybody goes to Canada. They meet a bunch of like Indian people up there, and they're brown, so they think they're Mexican, and that's why it's called El Canada.
Shouldn't it be El Canada?
It's the most retarded story I've ever heard.
El Canado.
Oh yeah, it's masculine.
I will.
Hold on, guys.
Hello.
Elric,
No,
come and say hi.
Hi.
You are very loud.
Hello.
I'm glad I pulled you back.
Hola. Welcome to
they-
El Canado.
They say, I'm not repeating that. All right, guys, I'll be right back.
What did
All right.
say?
Kelta, you're in charge.
Yep. We'll be the same.
I don't know if that means everyone's going to be more retarded or less retarded, but anyway, I'll just keep going.
Always more retarded.
Pretty much. My favorite research moments aren't even necessarily like, oh, did I get something 100% accurate, but is taking concepts and then stretching them around to work within the story. Like a good example is, because the series 365 operates on a lot of rule of cool, what I'll ultimately wind up doing is taking elements and Rottweiler Pusher. Fantastic. What I'll ultimately wind up doing is like, okay, no one's going to do this because it sounds insane, but because we're already in borderline fantasy territory as is, we're going to push this to the limit. A good example is the character of Lita from Urban Adventure. And I don't make a big deal out of this, but the V8 in that car is actually right in the hood. So that bug has a slightly elongated hood, as opposed to, the standard model where you couldn't fit shit into that boot. But the thing is, there are V8 there. Paul Newman actually made a Indy ready V8 VW Beetle, except the engine was in the back seat, so it was like directly behind him, and then he had cooling coming through the boot at the front of the car. So yeah, as everyone slowly files out.
I was actually Googling pictures of it, but
yeah, no. So it's like
You're
there's stuff
Googling
like
pictures
that.
of me again? What?
Totally. Anyway, so there's stuff like that. There's stuff like I mentioned the M56 Scorpions, which for those who don't know are basically these small mobile anti-aircraft guns.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was essentially, because they have a really slow, really slow top speed, I give them a fucking I can't remember if it's a V or if it's an inline, but I give them a 12-cylinder engine, so it's like it's not gonna hit Jaguar speeds, but it ain't gonna be capped at like 35 miles an hour. This fucker's gonna.
Well, it's like people who don't know anything about tanks. They assume all tanks move slow.
no,
I'm like,
dude.
I've seen tanks that go like 50, 60 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Calta, this
No, and-
this goes in line with double research. You get double research points here because historically, and Napoleon was obsessed with this. The Mongolians were obsessed with this. The Huns. Every great battle commander knows
On
that
Google?
speed, mobility, the ability to it equals adaptation. So you can you can form up your line, get some new information, and because you've invested in mobility, you can just reform your stuff and win the battle. Like before they even
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the other things that I like about the way I structure battles in the main series story, The War, because you'd think, you'd think by sheer overwhelming, these giant, quarter-mile long hover tanks would be like, oh god, it's the apocalypse coming down on these guys. But because everyone is in these comparatively smaller cars and bikes, there's greater maneuverability, so there's a greater chance to get in and start hitting the weak spots on these tanks, which I think the general rule of thumb is that the turret ring is the weakest spot in universe. So if you eat through the turret ring, basically that tank's done for. And so it's really fun working out those strategies, and it's really great working with my friend on that too, because we're always going over like not just battle strategies but also the practical stuff. Because while this is a rule of cool series, while this is mostly like a Saturday morning cartoon for adults kind of setup,
you don't want to be like Mortal
a
Engines.
level of realism to the act. So it makes sense.
I nerfed my overall military weaponry in my sci-fi book.
Same.
Well, because it's like I was like, okay, this is in the future. We already have artillery that could fire 80 miles away, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to have to think about a artillery shell that can fire 80 miles away when I'm doing a big, because eventually there's going to be a big war. So
right.
I did justify it away, basically being because they've got this AI technology that's been ruling over them for years and years and years. Yeah. It's like they stopped producing that stuff. So there's other weaponry and stuff produced, but not
like people.
Not for that.
The AI can breed it out of them, so to speak. Make them have floppy ears, in a couple.
Well, they could still theoretically build the technology, but they would have to start building it if a war surprise. But with this AI, he has so much control. He doesn't. That would never happen.
Right.
Well, I think also they need. Go ahead.
Good God. Well, I think also another thing I wound up doing is it's fun to devise plausible tech, even though it's not fully realistic. Like a good example is how laser guns in the series actually work, where it isn't like, oh, these are these specially modified super sci-fi, prototypes or anything. What it is essentially this charged up cartridge that you load up, and it locks itself into place, and it basically acts like a bump stock where you just the hammer just keeps slapping it, and so you have everything. Basically, everything becomes like a machine gun, more or less.
So you're saying your proud research moment is to do research on multiple areas and then create hybrid story building elements or world
basically
building
elements. It's you take what you need, and then you take what you need, and then you kind of synthesize it into the elements that help keep the plot going, that keeps the world on a state, makes the world make sense, basically. There's stuff that I've conceptualized that I don't even have to write about in the series. So long as I understand how it works, it's just it's there, it's part of the world. We talk about it like we understand it, and you don't have to go crazy on it.
Yeah. And before we pass it along to the next one, I just want to say the reason the C stuff is my proudest is because I don't know. I even worked in a warehouse with tons of people, from all different kinds of backgrounds, and I went around and asked certain people if they had any sailing experience and stuff. And the closest I got was a scuba diver. Okay, so I didn't know any sailors. I couldn't show anybody a passage and be like, "Is this on point?" So
wait, where are you asking these people? You just walking the Bob Evans, hey, does anybody near sail?
No, he worked in a warehouse.
Is anyone a seaman?
I prefer just walking around on the street, just go up and be like, "Excuse me, sir, do you sail?" No.
Yes.
Do you sail? And then there's someone laying
in the middle of Wisconsin.
Have you ever felt the wind on your face in the spray of the sea?
During the lockdowns, yep. And the floppy ear comment I made earlier, Kahuna, there's a study that they did in Russia where they found out it only takes about 2 or 3 generations of selective breeding to make a fox have floppy ears.
You just have to. About people. I'm like, what the fuck are you?
No,
I don't really remember where I put it in, but I know if I learn some quirky factoid, I'll probably try to incorporate it into my story somehow, just to be just to have the reader be like, wait, is this a real thing?
I
I don't remember what those cases were, but I'll say with my final thought on this is just like, especially when I was at school, hate the idea of studying, hate it. But it's like, this is what the great thing about like writing a book is. It's like, man, this makes me love doing the research and actually learning stuff. So it's like,
Absolutely.
I don't know. I wish I did this in high school because then maybe I wouldn't be such a fucking tard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your proudest moment, Bats? Your proudest.
I have bad recall when it comes to just anything. So it's like I can't really think. I do remember very specifically though, like with the island, like there's a part with like a charcoal thing where they're like carrying like a wooden tube of like charcoals, which to be
As
able
soon as you
to
said charcoal, I was like, based.
be able to produce a fire at a different location much quicker. You just lay the hot coals there and then boom.
Yeah. Evely, did you? I know the musical equivalent exists for you. What was something that like?
It's all the production aspects. It's just, I mean, the research is near endless. It seems like, especially with new like plugins and even like AI mastering and all this sort of stuff. But it's nigh on endless watching other people do things.
Researchers plugs. Good.
Do like really highly rated, highly viewed producers showing you how to mix or do EQing on vocals or something of that nature, and they don't do the same thing. And then you're like, oh, and
what's interesting too on that front is learning the old school ways of doing things. Like the way I was able to understand reverb is when I watched Bruce Swedian, who's legendary engineer, legendary producer, worked with major stars, including Michael Jackson, and seeing just the way they demonstrate reverb, where you're actually playing the speakers, facing a wall, and then you're recording the reverberation coming back.
Oh man, even that was one thing that it's very similar to that impulse relay, I think it's called, on an amp. And in the old days, it was where you had the microphone set up on the amp for recording, and now it's all digital, so it's all like numbers and all of that. But that was something I never knew about it, and I was just doing research one day, and you stumble upon that. It's like, man, something else I didn't even know existed, and now I got to go down that rabbit hole and try to figure it out. And I hate this aspect of music making. I just want to create riffs and I want to put pieces together and have fun. Then you have to start doing it. I hate research, but I've done so much of it, and it's
that's like technology based trying to figure that stuff out. That's
you should just do what Bathory did, which is use every tool in the studio to make the shittest sounding record,
the trash can across the street.
Angels and Airwaves.
I put my guitar inside of a cardboard box. Yeah.
Angels and Airwaves used like silverware drawers slamming and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, dude. No, that stuff can get cool though.
There was one that was an old mechanical anvil, like coal powered anvil, that would slam metal with pressure, and
that's
they
some
used
Beatles
that as
shit,
part of the
dude.
bait for their song. I'm like,
dishwasher or no, a washing machine door slamming. That's what was it?
I'll say like I did
my soul right there.
I did my own like made up metal, but I was like, I did research. I was like, so is it possible? Are there any metals that get sharper upon heat? Because they typically get duller, right? Obviously, but no, there's actually a point before it reaches, a certain point where it actually does tend to get sharper. So I'm like, well, theoretically, then you could have like a make believe metal that the hotter it gets, it has like an extreme melting point, and it just gets sharper and sharper and sharper, right?
It stays hard because it's a fictional metal. And,
exactly. Well, it's actually more like a floppy metal until you apply heat to it, so it gets harder and sharper.
Well, it's like sci-fi fantasy. We all have to have the unbreakable, cut through almost anything sword. But I don't mind. I love it. But
it's used for armor. The engines can get so hot.
Well, I mean, the way I look at it is the way Stan Lee looks at power scaling, which is the guy who I want to win is gonna fucking win, dude.
Well,
no matter what the setup is.
Kahuna touches on something timeless here. There's certain elements, like a sword is the most basic weapon. Maybe you could argue like a knife or even a spear, because a spear is like it doubles as a walking stick. So
spear is a better weapon than a sword for like your average troop.
there's this timeless
absolutely.
truth. There's this timeless truth whenever you get into story writing, especially fantasy, sci-fi. Like sci-fi is a great example, right? Because in a sci-fi world, it's like, okay, this is like space fantasy. This is like futuristic. What is the most realized version of like a melee weapon? Okay, it's gonna look something like a lightsaber or a vibroblade, or like what Bats described, or like what we see in a lot of sci-fi stuff. What's the most realized protection out there? Well, it's gonna look like something like power armor or a mech. You know what I mean? Or
like energy shields, like Halo style guy.
T'Challa's suit with the
No, not that.
Yeah, Iron Man suit. Yeah, like
that suit it creates some problem. It takes away the stakes of the fight.
It does. It's broken.
It's a really major problem in that movie.
Combine that suit technology with Iron Man technology, and then give it all to Spider-Man, and just everybody can retire, basically. But yeah, I think you're right there, Kahuna. So Evely, you were saying that your pride with it comes from like a mechanical aspect, like just building knowledge and tricks.
Pride is the wrong word. It's just something I've done because I've
celebrating pride with Justin.
Okay, something you think is cool about the research, I guess would be a better way. It's something you geek out about, like you're happy with, like, and you're saying like the mechanical aspect.
I mean, learning things so that you can make the overall quality of your sound better is nice.
Well, you're talking about troubleshooting something, essentially. You're not really talking about it's research, but it's different kind. I mean, it's not actually, like for story writing aspects.
One thing that was kind of fun till I never had like a guitar teacher or anything like that. And there's a dude named Bernth on YouTube who does these awesome tutorial videos. I can't remember what band he plays in. And watching that and trying to research how to play faster. Simple things like, how are you holding your pick? What is your angle of attack? What's your wrist like? Where's your arm placed? That was cool. I looked at that. I'm like, well, my arm's like this. He's like, try just lifting it up like this and just turning a little. I'm like, oh my God, I'm faster now. And that was really cool. Little things like that. So that
are you happy or irritated when you find out that I could have been faster?
Yeah.
But a tiny little adjustment to just like a nothing adjustment.
There's so many things where I'm like, if I just had a good teacher when I was young, I would have, man.
So
well, if you have a good teacher, you stand on the shoulders of giants. You don't have to figure it all out yourself. It's way better. Yeah.
Right. So my wife, I'll say this just because it's a really, really cool concept. In my wife's book that she's writing right now, she's got plastic swords. And if you think about it, plastic is really hard, even compared to a lot of metals. And the riot shields are plastic. Right. So I don't know, just kind of a cool concept to use plastic, and plus it's completely clear. So then
not to mention, you get to kill your enemies with microplastics.
Yeah. Well, it's like also it's clear, and then also like you think like you put like a sciencey light into it to kind of like reflect the environment or stuff to make it even more translucent. So like they're kind of almost fighting with like slightly invisible blades. That are also
crazy, actually.
Very
crazy. Yeah. Thinking about that,
Look, you can't remember, see actually, I think it was a Kyle Hill video where there was a certain type of like plastic that actually refracted light in such a way that basically it made it look like when you walked behind it, there was nothing there because the way it refracted the reflection. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so all like cool things. I saw basically it was
pretty much.
Basically, we saw like a guy try to like on YouTube try to make like an invisible sword, and it was clear plastic and was really cool, but it was like really efficient like as a sword. It was like sick. It's just like, oh yeah, how could I incorporate that and make it
just
like
don't fight against armor, and since it's plastic, everybody freaking has one. So if one breaks or it's not usable,
it's like
how you're gonna have to fight completely different. You're having trouble seeing the opponent's blade. So now you got to think there's different even combat style associated with it and everything.
For weak points too.
Which to be fair, as a filmmaker, I'd love to shoot something like that because then you have you get to do something practical there. If you had like someone with a suit and then have a squib go off because the sword essentially for all intents and purposes appears invisible.
Yeah.
So there's actually a lot of really fun.
I want to see the story where you have an invisible sword and then you'll lose it.
Well, because it's like, where did I put that? She's trying to be unique, right? It's like, well, we're not going to do laser swords. That's been done. Like, special metal. Like, vibroblades is like, wait, have people done
It's made of
plastic swords?
unobtainium.
Yeah. What about just plastic? It's like, yo, that's actually kind of cool and like kind of futuristic too. So
Well, again, it's taking the common trope, which is like the sword that cuts better or is unbreakable or has some other cool thing about it, and finding a creative way to still do that. Like a friend of mine, he wrote a sci-fi book, and what he did, and what
It
he
releases
did was
estrogen into
the
the body.
swords and the suits for these characters in the sci-fi world. The metal, only one person in the entire universe knew how to work the metal and how to form it. But because the reason it was you couldn't destroy it was because it came from a different dimension, a different galaxy, like a different existence altogether, and it had somehow gotten pulled into this one.
So
That's
the
why
physics
it
of
could
this
not
world
be-
don't affect it. Yeah,
Yeah,
like gravity.
That's exactly it.
you also got to think too, like culturally, you have like some like gang members, and they're not probably going to use invisible swords. They're probably going to use ones with like neon lights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's stupid and impractical, but like,
Like
they
when
would
you're
do
at the
it, they
rave,
try
but
to
you
be
also
flashy.
need to be packing.
on a base. Kahuna, what's something that you've researched in your writing? I know you had a whole novel, and you are a writer. Contrary to what
My
He is
divorce
a
really
really
inspired
right.
one of my lost novels. I learned a lot of research there. Really went into it. No, the Hawaiian stuff. Every time I talk to like my grandfather, he'll tell me some more obscure Hawaiian facts that most Hawaiians don't even know. Like the reason, like everybody knows that haole is insult, and
Racial
if you ask
slur.
a Hawaiian who knows, they say it means visitor. But that's not, but why is that an insult? It's not. It's because they don't have the full context. The two parts of the word come together to basically mean you are a visitor here, but you are not welcome, and you will leave with an open hand, meaning you leave with nothing. That's why it's an insult.
So it's
You are
kind of
you are an
so it's kinda
unwelcomed
like-
guest.
I don't
So-
know.
so
Last
it's
time I
kinda
left with a
like
bunch of shit.
What the fuck just happened? One of the Jake. What did you
Sorry,
say?
Jake. Yeah.
No, it's just that, so it's kind of like how sometimes gaijin is used as an insult in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or
Well,
Ringo.
yeah, it's used as this, but they like a lot of times they also genuinely use that word for outsider.
Oh, yeah, no,
but,
of
yeah.
course.
I thought they were just talking about like a guy named Gene. Like, hey, it's that guy Gene.
Oh, dude, I'm passing away.
All right. You just watched a clip from the Iron Seas podcast. Make sure to like this, subscribe, it helps us out a little bit, and please catch the show live at 9:30 Eastern every Tuesday.